In a previous video, we spoke about calling a function. In this video, we're going to write a function. We're going to write our own command, so to speak. So you can see I've written a function in lines 9 to 14. So I've written a function and I've called the function add and print two variables. That's the name of the function I've decided to write. And for the purposes of this function, I've decided that I need to have two parameters. So when someone calls this function, they're going to have to give me two pieces of information. Now, I'm going to store those two pieces of information in a variable called A and a variable called B. So when you're defining a function, the first thing you have to do is you have to use this keyword def. DEF, spelt all lowercase. So you say, this is a special word called a keyword in Python, and it is used to define a function. Then you have your function name. Then you have the opening bracket. You may or may not have anything in between the brackets, depending on the type of function you're writing and what you want the function to do. Because my function wants to add two numbers, I want the user to give me two pieces of information. So I have two parameters in there. One parameter is called A and one parameter is called B. They're variables that will be set to whatever the user passes into me. Then you have the closing bracket, and then you always have a colon here like that, the two dots. The other thing that's really important is you have to indent your code. So space means something in a Python program. Not all programming languages are like this. So the way that Python knows when your function finishes is the first line you have a space, and you start writing the code inside in your function. So this here is the first line, and the second line, the third line, the fourth line of my function. And now here in line 17, I'm back to sort of the margin again. So I've come back in. So Python knows this is no longer the function. The function has finished up here. So indentation, it's called, and it's very, very important in Python. So you have to indent, and I use the tab key to indent. And the tab key is that key on your keyboard, usually beside the letter Q, and it has sort of like two arrows on it. So when you press the tab key, typically speaking, your keyboard will put in about 4 spaces. So I use the keyword def, I give my function a name, I have my open brackets, my closing brackets, my colon, and then I hit tab and I start writing my code. And when I'm finished my function, I make sure to sort of come back out to the margin again. So this is a function. This here is actually a comment. It's a special comment, so I could get rid of it and it would make no effect. It's a special comment called a doc string, and you can use this comment for functions, and they're used to describe your functions. So I've just written a comment, adds and prints out, that should say and, adds and prints out the value of, spelled wrong, the value of the two parameters A and B. So it's just a little bit of information about the function. And this is recommended practice that you put a doc string, or a little comment like this, at the top of your function, because some programming environments, sort of like Mu, like editors like Mu, they can use this to help people understand what your function does. But as I say, if you leave it out, it doesn't affect the program at all. So my function really only has 2 lines. You know, we could get rid of the doc string and it wouldn't matter. So what I do is I create a variable called answer, and I put it equal to whatever the user gives me, passes in A, added to B. So I'm going to add A to B, and I'm going to put the resulting value in the variable called answer. And then my function prints out the value of A plus the value of B is equal to the value of answer. So that's it. That's my function written. I have now, I've written a function, or what some people would say is you've declared a function. And you have to write your function before you can use it. So you can see down here in line 26, I am calling the function that I wrote. I'm calling the add and print two variables function. I had to write it. I had to define it up here before I can call it. Otherwise, Python won't know that there is such a function that such a function exists. So here you go. Here I am testing it. So I created a variable called var1 for variable 1, another variable called var2, and I put var1 equal to 10 and I put var2 equal to 20, and I call my function and I pass it in variable 1 and variable 2. So another way I could have done it is I could have just passed in the number 10 and the number 20. That would have been fine too. Or I could have mixed it up. I could have put in the number 10 and var2, either or. But I put in the variables, the variable names, and the values within those variables get passed to my function. So now in this particular example, A here will become 10 because var1 contains the value 10, and B will become 20 because var2 contains the number 20. So I'm passing it in 10 and 20. So A will be 10, B will be 20, so it'll be 10 plus 20. The answer then will become 30, and we'll see 10 plus 20 is 30. Hopefully that's what we'll see getting printed out. Just to show you that you don't have to just pass in numbers, of course. Here I've changed the value of var1 and I've put it equal to the string hello. And I've changed the value of variable 2 and I've put it equal to the string u. And I call my function again, add and print two variables, and I pass in var1 and var2. Now this time A is going to be hello and B is going to be u. And I wonder what the answer is going to be. What happens when you add hello, the word hello to the word you, and we'll see it getting printed out here. So we'll see that in a second. We'll see the answer in a second when I run this program. And here's another example of me calling the function that I wrote, add and print two variables. And this time I'm passing in literal values. I'm actually passing in the value. I'm not passing in a variable that stores the value. And it so happens that I'm passing in floats. So they're numbers with decimal points. So in this particular example, when I call my function, A will become 3.7 and B will become 1.3. And I will add it. And finally, in line 41, I'm writing a new function, and it's called just add two variables. So the last one was called add and print two variables. This is called just add two variables. So I've decided that my function will only do the addition and it won't print out anything to the user. Also, the big difference with this function is it returns something. As it returns a value back. So again, here I am defining my function. Just like any function, I have to use the keyword def. I give my function a sensible name. I have my open bracket. In this particular case, I'm going to be taking in two arguments. Whoever calls this function is going to have to pass me two items. I have the end of my closing bracket, and then I have my colon. I have my doc string. I could, if I wish, have left that out. And then I do my mathematical addition. I say A plus B, and I store the answer in a variable called the answer. And in line 45, I return the answer. So whoever calls this function and gives me two pieces of information for A and B, I will return the answer of A plus B. Notice the subtle difference between this one. This function didn't return anything, but it printed it out to the screen. Now that assumes the user wants it printed out to the screen. Maybe someone doesn't want the answer printed out to the screen. So this function here doesn't print out anything to the screen, but it gives the answer back. And then whoever calls the function, if they want to print the answer out, they can. If they don't have to. And again, also note that I'm indenting. I have to indent. It has to be indentation here. And the return statement typically comes at the typically the very last line of your function. So your function does all its work, and then if it's going to return anything, it will use the keyword return and the variable that contains the information it wants to return. So here you see I'm calling the function, and again, compare this line to, say, line 35, where I was calling the old function. In line 35, I just called the function, passed it, in this case, two floats, and the function added up the two floats and it printed out to the screen. Here, when I call the function, this function is going to give me back something. So I'm passing in, again, a literal 1 and a literal 2. So I'm passing in the number 1 and the number 2. And it's going to pass me back. It's going to give me back 1 plus 2. So it's going to give me back 3. Now, because it's returning something back to me, I better store that something somewhere. So I created a variable called answer. And answer is going to contain the value that's returned from this function. So in this particular case, 3. And then if I want to print it out, I can. If I don't have to. But I'm going to go ahead and print it out. So in line 50, you see I'm printing it out. Okay, let me run this and just make sure we're happy with all of the output. So we run it. The first output was I added and printed two numbers, 10 and 20. Look, 10 plus 20 is 30. There you go. That was the function printing it out. It said 10 plus 20 is 30. Then I called the function again, but this time I passed it in hello and you. And you see hello plus you is hello you. So that's interesting. So when you add two words or you add two strings, what Python does is join them together, which is known as concatenation. It concatenates them, so it joins them together. So I've now got a word hello you here. Then I called it a third time, and I passed in two float literals, and again the function printed out 3.7 plus 1.3 is 5.0. One of the interesting things to note here is if you have a float and you add it to another float, the answer will always be a float, even if the decimal, the number after the decimal point is 0. So it's 5.0. And then finally this one, I called it, I passed it 1 and 2, it would have given me back 3, and then I printed out the answer, the return value. And I see it coming out here. After calling, just add two variables, 1, 2, I got 3. So everything is working as it should.